To complete the mission, I had conquered Alan for 2 years. Yet he misunderstood me as someone who bullied his first love. He smiled as he crushed the lit cigarette into my palm, and during my period, he threw me into the freezing pool, pressing my head underwater and not allowing me to come up. Later, the system finally allowed me to switch my conquest target. I no longer tried to please Alan, but he suddenly acted like a rabid dog, trapping me tightly in his arms, his eyes red as he tried to kiss me, only to be yanked away the next second by another man grabbing his collar. The man smiled unhurriedly. Alan, you dare covet your brother's girlfriend? That's right, my new conquest target was Alan's own older brother, and the actual head of the Jean family. Chapter 1. In the midst of everyone's laughter, I struggled to support myself against the edge of the pool, trying to climb out, but the moment half my body emerged from the water, the teasing around me grew louder. Instinctively, I looked up. A few boys standing in front of me let their gazes slide down from my face, staring meaningfully at a certain area. Summer uniforms were thin. I immediately realized what they were staring at. Before I could react, a hand reached over and pushed my head back underwater. Get the hell out, all of you. Alan's hand was still pressing me down, but his words were aimed at the others. When I resurfaced again, Alan was the only one left by the pool. Cough, cough. I choked on a few mouthfuls of water. Alan stood with both hands in his pockets, looking down at me from above. A cold, mocking smile curled at his lips. Aren't you disgusting? Just as I placed my hand on the pool edge, he kicked it away. Alan crouched before me, pinching my chin and forcing my face up toward him. Everyone knows I like Miranda, yet you follow me around every single day. He lifted his lips into a cruel smile, speaking slowly. Are you that cheap, Wendy? You like me that much? I stayed silent, not knowing how to respond. Maybe on a normal day, for the sake of the mission, I would have answered yes without hesitation. But this time, with the freezing water soaking me and the dull cramps from my period, I couldn't force out a single word. Alan waited. But when no answer came, the smile on his lips gradually faded. He released my chin with disgust. After giving me a long, unreadable look, he turned and left. I finally managed to climb out of the pool, staggering forward with my heavy, freezing body. I only walked 2 steps before everything went black and I collapsed. Chapter 2. When I woke up again, I was lying in a hospital bed. It was the school security guard who found me unconscious and brought me to the hospital. The system finally seemed unable to bear watching anymore. Do you want to change your conquest target? I tugged at my pale lips. Yes. Mission to conquer Alan has failed. This is your last chance, the system said. I nodded calmly. If I kept getting entangled with Alan, I probably wouldn't even live long enough to use my last chance. He would torment me to death. A moment later, the system spoke again, and for once, it actually sounded hesitant. This time, your conquest target is Brandon. I didn't understand what was so hard for it to say. Brandon Jean, 27 years old, head of Jean Corporation, the largest conglomerate in the city. It was just a coincidence that he and Alan shared the same last name. Maybe the system had finally taken pity on me after seeing how miserably I had been treated while conquering Alan. I'll extend the mission deadline. You'll have enough time to prepare for the college entrance exam. You're allowed to begin the task after the exam. I let out a breath and, for the first time in a long while, gave a genuine smile. Thanks. In my original world, due to certain reasons, I never got to take the college entrance exam. This counted as making up for that regret. Chapter 3. On Monday, when I stood at the door of Alan's classroom holding a small cake, everyone around showed an expression of understanding. Someone even called out, Alan, your little fangirl is here to give you cake again. Through the glass window, I saw Alan slouched lazily in his seat, letting out a contemptuous scoff. Just because she gives it to me, I have to take it? Tell her to get lost. I pressed my lips together and walked to the first row near the door. Could you help me give this to your class monitor? As I said it, I handed the cake over. The entire class fell silent in an instant. Then, every single head turned toward Alan, whose face had darkened. It seemed everyone was shocked that I wasn't here for Alan. The girl in the first row stammered a reply and placed the cake on the monitor's empty desk. The security guard had told me it was a male student who first noticed I had fainted. Later, I learned it was Alan's class monitor. Coming today to thank him was perfectly reasonable. I ignored the strange looks around me, and also Alan's intense stare burning into my back. After expressing my thanks, I turned to leave. I had barely taken one step when a loud crash erupted behind me. I paused and instinctively looked back. Alan, who had been sitting in his seat moments ago, had somehow walked over to the monitor's desk and kicked the table over. The cake had fallen to the floor, smashed into a mess. Across the room, Alan met my eyes and gave a taunting smile. Oops, I accidentally dropped your cake. What now? I wanted to shove his face into that ruined cake, but Alan was absolutely not someone I could afford to provoke. Rumor said his father was the biggest shareholder of this school. I turned away indifferently, ignoring him, and left. Another crash, even louder than the last, sounded behind me. I didn't look back. Chapter 4. Recently, I had practically become the topic of discussion for the entire school. Wendy really seems to not like Alan anymore. Whenever someone came to ask me for confirmation, I nodded quickly to show my determination. Who would like that unreasonable, barbaric psycho? I no longer followed Alan around, no longer tried to please him, but my actions didn't seem to convince anyone. They all thought I was just playing hard to get. Alan clearly thought so too. It wasn't until after the college entrance exam that I met Brandon for the first time, and Alan went insane. Chapter 5. The graduation party was held the day after the college entrance exam. All the performances had already been rehearsed in advance. Our class's final program was a group chorus, and I had been selected as the piano accompanist on stage. When I put on the formal dress and stood in front of the mirror, I actually froze for a second. The system even popped up to make a rare comment. That dress, it really suits you. You look ethereal. I smiled lightly. Thanks. Then it added, Brandon was invited to attend today. There's something you need to know beforehand. When I walked out of the dressing room, I clearly sensed a wave of quiet gasps around me. I felt a little embarrassed, my ears heating up, but the smile on my lips stiffened the next second. Alan was standing not far away. He seemed to have just come from the baseball hall. He held a baseball bat loosely at his side, wore a black baseball cap, and looked like he was chewing gum. His gaze drifted toward me. Then he walked over. Everyone out. With Alan's intimidation factor, no one dared refuse. Chapter 6. The dress had an off-shoulder neckline. Alan's gaze openly dropped to my collarbone. I frowned, about to walk away. Try leaving. Go on. His indifferent voice carried a very clear warning. Do you want something? I didn't look at him, my tone impatient. Well, I've heard a few rumors lately, so I came to confirm them with you. Alan casually swung the baseball bat in his hand, then lifted it to hook under my chin. Raising it, smiling, he asked, They say you don't like me anymore. Is that true? I couldn't figure out what he meant, so I chose to tell the truth. Yes. The baseball bat shifted, brushing along the side of my face with a light tap. Alan continued smiling, but his eyes were icy cold. Are you looking for death, Wendy? I didn't understand. Not bothering him and Miranda anymore, shouldn't that be a good thing for him? He stepped closer to me, lowering his head toward my collarbone, pinned by the baseball bat at my side. I couldn't move at all. I clenched my hands, about to push him away when the homeroom teacher's voice called out from the doorway. Alan paused his movement. He lifted his eyelids and looked at me. Listen, don't let me hear that rumor again. When will this psycho drop dead? I didn't say a word as I pushed him away and walked out the door. Chapter 7. The performance went very smoothly. Our class even won an award, but since we had already graduated and the class was officially disbanded, no one cared about the prize. So, I volunteered to go on stage to accept it. Because today's award presenter was Brandon Jean, the man, dressed in a suit, walked toward me at an unhurried pace. His face was one that could stand above anyone else's, and it looked slightly familiar. I accepted the trophy he handed me. Thank you, Mr. Jean. I smiled at him, lips curved, dimples showing. He gave me a thoughtful glance before returning a distant smile. We didn't exchange a single word as I walked off stage, but I wasn't discouraged. Moments later, I looked at the time and slowly circled around to Brandon's seating area. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a metal pole coming loose. The instant it dropped toward Brandon, I lunged toward him. "Mr. Jean!" I threw myself over him. A sharp pain shot through my back. "Wendy!" Alan's voice came from not far away. I forced my eyes open. Alan was running toward me, panic on his face, something I had never seen before. The next second, I fell into Brandon's arms and passed out from the pain. Chapter 8. I had a minor fracture in my back, but as I wished, I ended up living in Brandon's home. He carried me to the hospital for tests, and afterward, he brought me straight here. When I woke again, it was early dawn. Brandon was sitting on the sofa across from me. His voice sounded unusually gentle when he spoke. "Now tell me, who made you put on such an act? HM?" So this was an interrogation. I pushed myself upright, looking toward the man sitting in the shadows. "No one." My mind heated up, and the next word slipped out. "Mr. Jean, I like you." Brandon narrowed his eyes, smiling faintly. "You like me?" I nodded sincerely. Brandon rose to his feet, slowly undoing his suit jacket. A chill crept down my back. He walked closer, bent down, and slipped an arm behind me, lifting me abruptly against him. His fingers traced near the hem of my clothes. His voice was gentle, yet coaxing and dangerous. "If you like me, then you wouldn't refuse something like this, right?" I knew he was testing me, but I still couldn't stop trembling. His hand slid slowly toward my collarbone, his tone unhurried. I clutched his shirt tightly, completely at a loss. Brandon straightened, cupping the side of my face and drawing me closer. His breath drifted over my lips. "Scared now?" I snapped back to awareness and shoved him away. I'll just go to the bathroom." This bedroom had an ensuite bathroom, but I pretended not to notice and hurried out. Chapter 9. But when I accidentally pushed open another room, I froze completely. Belts, whips, and other items hung on the walls. Dryly, I asked the system, "Why does it feel like Brandon is even more of a psycho than Alan?" The system sounded embarrassed. "I forgot to tell you, Alan has an unknown identity. He is actually..." The next second, someone grabbed my wrist. My whole body stiffened as I slowly turned my head. "Alan?" He frowned, letting out a cold laugh. "You don't like me, but you've fallen for Brandon, that maniac? What right did this psycho have to call someone else a psycho?" "What are you doing here?" I asked. Alan tugged me along. "I'm taking you away. You'd better stay far away from Brandon. He's a lunatic," he said, before I could say anything else. A slow, gentle voice echoed from not far away. "Little brother, what are you doing?" Alan froze instantly, pulling me behind him. Little brother? Alan Jean, Brandon Jean. They were actually biological brothers. Alan had deliberately hidden his true background and his relation to Brandon. I peeked out from behind him, and immediately felt my limbs turn cold. Brandon was holding a shooting pistol, aimed directly at Alan. His expression was still calm. It might not be lethal, but the intimidation was undeniable. "Come here." He shifted his gaze toward me. "Don't go," Alan shouted. I stood frozen, wavering. For the first time, I felt so hopeless I wanted to die. Why were the two brothers I had to conquer each more unhinged than the last? Chapter 10. At that moment, the system whispered something in my ear. I looked toward the man holding the gun across from me. A few seconds later, I pulled my hand free from Alan's grip and walked toward him. "Wendy." I turned back, meeting Alan's eyes with complete calm. "Alan, don't act like you're risking your life to save me. All this time, the one who hurt me the most was you." He stared at me without blinking, gaze burning hot. I fucking made a mistake, okay? Isn't that enough? Don't go to Brandon." I didn't waver at all. I shook my head. When I reached Brandon, he lowered the gun as well. "Good girl." His lips curved faintly. He lifted my wrist and brought it to his lips. Tilting his head, he kissed it lightly. I had originally been afraid of this man who most likely had some deviant tendencies. But because of that small gesture, my face heated uncontrollably. Alan was dragged out by Brandon's bodyguards. I stood by the window, meeting Alan's gaze from afar as he stood in the rain below. "What are you looking at?" Brandon locked the door behind him, walking toward me casually. When I saw what he held in his hand, my smile froze. A thin leather belt. He raised an eyebrow slightly, the belt hanging loosely to the floor. I swallowed. Brandon didn't seem to notice my tension. With one arm, he lifted me and sat me on the window ledge. Let's continue what was interrupted earlier. He leaned down and brushed his nose against mine. A shiver ran through my entire body, and I blinked rapidly. Brandon's gaze flicked toward the window behind me. Clearly, he saw Alan. His fingers slid suggestively over my ear. Then he let out a low chuckle. Let's do it right here, okay? That's way too fast. Brandon, Alan's faint shout carried from outside. You wait, if you dare touch her. I'll kill you. I looked back. The drenched boy was once again being hauled away by bodyguards toward the edge of the neighborhood. Chapter 11. Brandon watched the whole scene indifferently. Only when Alan's figure completely disappeared did he slowly step back, putting some distance between us. He tossed the belt onto the window ledge casually. Explain why you came here, and I'll let you go back. Brandon unconsciously rubbed the silver ring on his finger as he smiled. Otherwise, don't ever think about leaving this place. You saw what's inside that room. I have countless ways to make you wish you were dead. Oh, I blinked. I wasn't planning on leaving anyway. And as for the things in that room, if you really want me to try them, I can agree, but can we limit it to one per day at most? Because some of those things look like they hurt a lot. Brandon stared at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. I jumped down from the window ledge and walked up to him, tilting my head to look up at him. The distance between us shrank again. His eyes were so dark they seemed unable to reflect even a glimmer of light. Mr. Jean, why are you so certain I approached you with ulterior motives? I told you from the very beginning, I like you. He lifted his eyelids slightly. I held his gaze, not hesitating for even a moment, and repeated, I like you, Brandon. The kind of like that happens at first sight. He still didn't believe me, but he allowed me to stay. I figured he probably just wanted to find out what my supposed motive really was. Chapter 12. Mr. Jean, tonight's dinner is something I made especially for you. Ding, favorability +5. I saw the news about you acquiring that company tonight. You're incredible. Ding, favorability +5. At night, leaning against the bed, I finally asked the question that had puzzled me for a long time. Why does his favorability increase even when I don't do anything? Even when I'm just complimenting him? Back when I was conquering Alan, I prepared gifts for a whole week, yet he tossed them aside without a thought. How could two brothers be so different? The system, incapable of understanding the complexity of human feelings, replied, Isn't this good? At this rate, it won't take long for you to return to your world. Judging from his childhood, he's someone who grew up starved for affection. Someone like you, constantly being kind to him, it's hard for him not to fall for you. I froze slightly. Then the system told me about Brandon's past. Brandon and Alan were half-brothers. His birth was far from normal. Father Jean had forced his mother, and that was how he came into the world. Later, Father Jean married Alan's mother. Brandon's mother was forcibly kept outside. After years of torment, she chose to end her life, leaving a young Brandon behind. Later, he was taken back into the Jean family, but only as an illegitimate child. Before Alan's mother passed away, Brandon never enjoyed a single day of being treated like the Jean family's eldest young master. Under all kinds of suppression, he lived worse than the household staff. Most of Father Jean's inheritance went to Alan. Brandon's current status was something he clawed his way to through endless hardships. No one has ever loved him, the system said. Even his own mother considered his birth a disgrace. You're the first person to approach him without wanting his money or status. It's normal for him to fall for you. I suddenly felt sad for him. No one had ever loved him, and he thought I was the first. But I was lying to him too. I was only doing a mission. Chapter 13. That feeling lingered in my heart. The next morning, still thinking about what the system told me, I kept getting distracted. Even when Brandon finished breakfast and was about to leave for the company, I remained dazed. I'm heading out, Brandon said as he buttoned his sleeve. I didn't react. Oh, okay. He paused, looking back at me. What's wrong? I stared blankly at him. Aren't you forgetting something? It took me 2 seconds before I stupidly went, "Huh?" Brandon had his suit draped over his arm, ready to put it on before leaving. Then, in the quiet air, a soft laugh sounded. Brandon tossed the suit aside and walked toward me with unhurried steps. "It's fine, I'll help you remember." He flicked the spoon out of my hand. Then, without warning, he lifted me up with one arm, so high. I sat in the cradle of his arm and looked down, afraid he might lose balance and drop me. I quickly wrapped my arms around his neck. Still holding me, Brandon started walking toward the room filled with unspeakable items. I grew tense. "What are you doing?" He smiled at me gently, but said nothing, which only made me more nervous, until I saw him pick up the belt. A horrible premonition hit me instantly. This time, Brandon actually used the belt. He tied my hands to the window ledge in the bedroom, then used a finger to lightly graze my chin. His tone was gentle. "You'll be untied when you remember. What if I need to go to the bathroom?" I stared at him in disbelief. From all the questions I had, I picked the most urgent one. Brandon paused, apparently thinking about the issue seriously. Soon, he came up with a solution, one that was worse than not solving the problem at all. When he suddenly lifted me earlier, I had kicked off my shoes in the confusion. Now I sat on the window ledge, legs hanging. Brandon crouched in front of me and slowly took my foot into his hand, as if admiring it, or playing with it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. After a long moment, his gaze lingered on my foot as he spoke softly. "How about I have a custom anklet made for you to lock in place, so you can move freely, in this room?" His fingers stroked my ankle lightly as he murmured, "And only in this room." A twisted upbringing had raised him twisted as well. In a flash, I remembered his question. "I like you," I said quickly. Every morning, before he left the villa, I would run up to him, confess, then smile and ask, "So today, do you like me even a little?" His favorability had been rising nonstop, yet his answer was always, no. But today was different. After I asked, he didn't respond. "Can you untie this now?" I whispered, "It's starting to hurt." Finally, Brandon moved. He set down my nearly numb foot and loosened the belt. I swallowed instinctively. After the mission succeeds, I'm supposed to leave. And when that moment comes, with Brandon's extreme obsession, he'll probably lose his mind. But when the time actually arrived, I realized I still didn't understand Brandon well enough. Chapter 14. When Brandon returned from the company that evening, dark clouds filled the sky, accompanied by low, rumbling thunder, a sign of a coming storm. Raindrops began pouring down in dense sheets. And that was when Alan, whom I hadn't seen in over a month, appeared. The people he brought took down the bodyguards outside the villa, and he kicked the door open in one strike. Alan's eyes locked onto me instantly. Chewing gum, he gave a lazy grin. "Wendy, I'm here to take you with me. This time, he won't be able to stop me." Because of the chaos he had just caused, I became flustered, and the soup I had been making for Brandon nearly boiled dry. I stared impatiently at the troublemaker. "I already told you I'm not leaving. Can you stop bothering me?" Alan rolled his neck, letting out a mocking laugh, eyes full of arrogant defiance. "You're leaving whether you want to or not." All this time, Brandon remained seated on the sofa, watching the farce with complete indifference. A loud thunderclap suddenly broke the tense atmosphere. Brandon stood up and casually walked to the dining table. "You made soup today?" His tone was relaxed. I nodded slowly. Clearly, he didn't take Alan seriously at all. Alan snorted. "Brandon, does pretending like this make you feel good? I came today not only to take Wendy away, but also to reminisce with you about the old days." He leaned lazily against the doorframe, expression oddly sentimental. "Remember? 5 years ago, when you were nothing, when you were basically no different from a dog. Whenever someone at home was in a bad mood, they took it out on you. Tell me, do you even remember how many slaps you took? How many kicks you endured?" I froze. The system had only told me vaguely that Brandon had suffered a lot back then, but the details were far more shocking. Alan frowned as he asked seriously, "Brandon, don't you think you were born a pathetic bastard?" His words dripped with ridicule and smugness. My fingers dug into the edge of the dining table, and as soon as he finished that last sentence, I couldn't hold back anymore. I grabbed the bowl beside me and hurled it at him. And what are you? Who gave you the right to judge anyone? Alan. I always thought you were trash. But I didn't expect you to be such a piece of filth. Caught off guard, Alan was hit at the temple. His expression darkened instantly as he glared at me, teeth clenched. You threw that at me for this pathetic bastard? Hearing the word bastard, the anger already boiling in me surged even stronger. I grabbed another bowl, ready to throw it, but Brandon raised a hand to stop me. When he looked at Alan, there wasn't a trace of anger on his face. I heard you adore your cousin quite a lot. He suddenly asked something completely irrelevant. Alan's gaze sharpened. What are you implying? Brandon smiled faintly, picked up the tablet beside him, played a video, and pushed it in Alan's direction. A woman's terrified screams pierced through the speakers. The screen clearly showed she had been kidnapped. The moment Alan recognized the girl, all color drained from his face. He forced a laugh. She's not in the country. Could the video compositing look any more fake? Brandon smiled as well. Valencia. Almost as soon as the word left his mouth, the previously arrogant and raging boy instantly deflated, like all the strength had been drained from him. The system had mentioned before that Alan treated this cousin almost like a biological younger sister. Chapter 15. With a heavy thud, Alan suddenly dropped to his knees without any warning. The situation reversed instantly. For a long moment, the boy spoke hoarsely. His hands, hanging at his sides, were clenched tight, full of unwillingness. But he still had no choice but to bow his head. Brother, please, save Linlin. Brandon walked out of the living room holding a deck of cards. He strolled leisurely toward Alan and squatted down in front of him. My gaze fell on the slight curve of Brandon's lips. There was unmistakable amusement in that smile. Suddenly, I had the illusion. All of Alan's provocations earlier were nothing but the antics of a clown. The real game was only just beginning. Brandon casually drew a card and held it between his fingers. He flipped it over. The ace of spades. Your cousin's life is in their hands. Kneeling to me won't help. With the gentlest voice, Brandon introduced the cruelest game. I'll give you 5 chances. Draw either of the 2 aces, and I'll save your cousin. But if you fail all 5 tries, for example, this card. Brandon waved the ace of spades lightly. Then he took a short knife from a bodyguard whose face was swollen with bruises and tossed it in front of Alan. He smiled. Either you let them execute your cousin, or you destroy your right hand. And she lives. Alan had no choice but to agree. He was prepared to lose his right hand. He used all 5 chances in under a minute. He didn't draw the card. Brandon's smile didn't change. What a pity. With that, he stood and walked over to the liquor cabinet, took out a bottle of Glenfiddich, poured himself a drink, and watched Alan with relaxed interest. Outside, the violent rain pounded the ground in a chaotic, maddening rhythm. It grew heavier, without end. Alan picked up the knife without a moment's hesitation, but the faint tremor in his hand betrayed his fear. He held the blade above his hand and froze. Then he looked toward me, forcing a dry, twisted smile. Wendy, don't look. My feelings were complicated. Even though I had always thought of myself as an outsider to this world, facing this kind of slightly bloody family feud for the first time still left a tightness in my chest that was hard to describe. I turned my head slightly, shifting my gaze away, and ended up facing Brandon. Suddenly, I realized something. From the moment Alan appeared, Brandon hadn't looked at me even once. But I didn't have time to think about it. From the corner of my eye, I saw Alan move. My whole body tensed instinctively, but nothing happened. 2 seconds later, I turned around. The knife tip was only 2 centimeters from the back of Alan's hand. The bodyguard had stopped him just in time. In the quiet air, a soft laugh broke through. Brandon toyed with the glass in his hand, speaking casually. Don't take it seriously. It was a joke. As for your cousin, she's probably already on her way home. She's perfectly safe. The video had been from days ago. Brandon had rescued her long before today. Alan immediately understood and dropped to the floor, frantically searching through the scattered cards. His movements halted quickly, and he lifted his gaze to meet Brandon's across the room. 2 brothers, one composed and noble, the other disheveled and defeated. The contrast could not be clearer. You tricked me? There aren't any aces in this entire deck. Brandon neither confirmed nor denied it. But he didn't need to. From the very beginning, this had all been his game. Brandon had been standing at the finish line the whole time, leisurely watching his naive little brother flail around like a clown. Chapter 16. Brandon, you win this time. Alan pushed himself up by the knee and stood. But I won't stay this stupid forever, letting you toy with me every time. I watched his retreating back and frowned slightly. After hesitating for a moment, I still grabbed an umbrella and ran after him. I completely missed the sound of Brandon crushing the glass in his hand behind me. Alan, I called out to him. He was soaked from head to toe, his posture looking a little defeated. Calming my emotions, I finally spoke softly. Can you stop coming to bother Brandon? What has he done wrong for you to keep going against him like this? Alan turned around. So you really like him now? Is that why you're taking his side? Brandon is just an illegitimate son born from an affair. Alan's voice landed heavy. His existence made my mother's life miserable from the moment she found out, up until the day she died. His birth meant my father betrayed her for a woman who believed her husband loved her deeply. Do you know how painful that was? I waited calmly for him to finish before replying. Is that Brandon's fault? Could he choose how he was born? The one at fault is your father, the man who acted irresponsibly and cared only for his own pleasure. Alan pressed his lips together, clearly unconvinced. Alan, you're wrong. His mother wasn't some mistress. She was also a victim. The boy froze, as if unable to understand what I was saying. I knew he would go find the truth on his own. I didn't waste any more words and headed back toward the villa. Wendy, I stopped. Do you really not like me anymore? A pointless question. I didn't want to answer, so I simply lifted my foot to leave. Alan spoke again, his voice low. After my parents died, I was the only one left. If you give up on me too, there'll really be no one in this world who loves me. I figured it was because his first love, Miranda, left the country after graduation, so he settled for me. But what he didn't know was, I had already fallen for his older brother. Alan, at least you were loved. But Brandon, in all 27 years of life, had never felt that once. Chapter 17. When I returned to the villa, Brandon was still standing at the liquor cabinet, his back facing me. He was alone in the living room. Why did you come back? Brandon adjusted a few misplaced bottles without turning around. What? His movements paused. He shook his head and let out a small laugh before finally turning and walking toward me. You saw me once and said it was love at first sight. What exactly are you playing at? Alan wasn't wrong. I really did live like a dog back then, even worse than one. You saw it yourself earlier. My psychology is twisted. Aren't you afraid that one day, on a whim, I'll kill you? He spoke lightly, like it was a joke, yet it was the first time he had exposed himself in such a self-destructive way. So earlier, Brandon had intentionally not asked me to leave the room. He had shown me the most real version of himself. Suddenly, I saw through the nonchalance. Beneath it was a deep insecurity. The system, silent for a long time, finally spoke. He actually wants you to stay. I knew. He had chosen the most extreme way to be honest with me. He had mentally prepared himself for the possibility that I would leave. That tiny spark of hope in him was pressed down until it was barely visible. As my gaze wandered, it suddenly caught on his right hand, slightly drawn back. You're hurt. Why didn't you clean the wound? I immediately shoved aside everything he just said and reached for his hand. Brandon hesitated, just for a moment, before pulling his hand away. What do you mean by that? His smile weakened. I reached for his hand again while muttering offhandedly. I know, you had a miserable childhood, and you grew up twisted. Is that enough? Can you just come with me so I can clean the wound? Too tired to argue with him anymore, I pushed him down to sit on the sofa. I brought the medicine kit and started treating him. Brandon, I lowered my eyes, never stopping my hands. It was the first time I called him by his full name. Stop degrading yourself. As I wrapped the bandage, I continued. You've never done anything wrong. You remember every small kindness others show you, so why do you insist on presenting yourself like some kind of monster? The system had told me earlier that Alan's cousin, Lin, had once given a candy to every child during a visit to the Jean household, including Brandon. For the young Brandon, that was the first time he had ever been treated equally, and he remembered it for years. That was why he saved the girl this time. Back then, I naively thought Brandon was actually a normal person, and the twisted part was just an act he put on. But later, I learned the truth. During many nights where he hovered between life and death, he really was twisted. I mean, what normal person uses those things? And ice cubes, how could anyone even think of putting? Chapter 18. I tied the final knot on the bandage into a little bow, quite artistically. If I said so myself. Then I held it up in front of Brandon. Looks nice, right? What did you go outside to tell Alan? He ignored my artistic creation entirely and went straight to another subject. I shrugged and answered simply. I told him to stop sticking to me like some annoying stray dog, making a mess every time he shows up, and interrupting me while I'm trying to pursue you. He's really irritating. Brandon lifted his eyes to look at me. At some point, the heavy rain outside had stopped. The gloom faded. Clouds drifted past, letting a faint light spill in. It reflected in the man's eyes. Looking at that face, one almost impossible not to fall for, my heart stirred a little. Without thinking, I spoke softly. Can I kiss you? I think I really might be starting to like Brandon. Where do you want to kiss? He asked. I knelt on the sofa, cupped his face in both hands, and leaned down to kiss his eyelid. Here, I answered only after kissing him. Then it struck me, maybe that wasn't very polite. Luckily, Brandon didn't seem to mind. His eyes were filled with a darkness so deep it felt like it could swallow light whole. Slowly, he leaned toward me, our lips separated by barely a centimeter. Why not kiss here? His voice was low, and the atmosphere flooded instantly with heat. I blinked, a little flustered. Can I? I asked carefully. You can. His voice sounded like it was deliberately tempting me. My thoughts moved sluggishly as I leaned in to lightly brush his lips. Soft and a little cool. Not going to kiss me again? Lost in his gentleness, I kissed him once more, this time not just a fleeting touch. Brandon pulled me into his arms, slowly pushing me down against the sofa. What began as gentle brushes and lingering traces deepened, until he pried my lips open and completely stole my breath. One of his hands supported the back of my neck, adjusting our angle again and again to match his kiss. The other braced against the sofa beside my ear. In a haze, I felt his love, silent, but overwhelming. Chapter 19. Before we had time to say anything else that day, Brandon was called away by his assistant to handle an urgent matter at the company. He didn't return until nighttime. At that moment, I had just finished showering. In his hand was a small box, roughly the size of his palm. The moment he entered my bedroom, he pressed down on my shoulder and pinned me against the door. Brandon tugged slightly at the knot of his tie, then lowered his head toward me. Instinctively, I blocked him. What are you doing? Kissing you. Brandon pulled my hand away and tilted my chin firmly. Right before his lips touched mine, he let out a short, self-mocking laugh, murmuring. He said, I thought about this all afternoon. As he kissed me, Brandon suddenly lifted me into his arms. He carried me to the bed, set me down, and leaned back against the headboard. Only after a moment did he finally pull away a little. As I tried to catch my breath, I began to scold him. Mr. Jean, you can't just kiss a girl whenever you want, unless we confirm our relationship. I'm not letting you kiss me again. Brandon responded with a quiet hum. Then he opened the box and took out a silver anklet. Tiny diamonds shimmered along the chain, beautifully delicate. He knelt on one knee before me, lifted my right foot onto his thigh, and fastened the anklet around my ankle. The next second, without warning, Brandon leaned down and kissed the top of my foot. Then he defined our relationship. You're mine. My eyes widened, a shiver running up my foot instantly. How could he kiss me, then go kiss my foot? As I stared in shock, Brandon raised his head to look at me. His eyes were gentle, a faint smile resting at his lips. He spoke softly, but the threat beneath his words was unmistakable. You chose to stay on your own. If one day you run away and I catch you again, I'll break your legs and keep you locked in this room forever. I had no words. Probably only Brandon could make a confession sound like a kidnapping threat. What if I die? If the mission succeeds, I'm supposed to leave this world. What will Brandon do then? The moment the words left my mouth, a sharp pain shot through my ankle. HSS. Brandon's grip around my ankle tightened instantly. I looked up, stunned. All this time, I had never seen Brandon lose composure. He was always calm, always wearing that faint, leisurely smile. This was the first time his face had no expression at all, and a storm-like pressure radiated from him. I gave a light, easy smile. I was just talking nonsense. Brandon stared at me in silence. Only when I began to feel uneasy did he lower his gaze again, in a very refined tone. He said, "I hope that's the last time I hear something like that. There he goes again with the threatening lines." He finally released my foot and leaned over me on the bed. I clamped my hands over my mouth. "No kissing." "Reason?" he asked. "You know very well where you just kissed." On this matter, I refused to back down. "For the next 3 days, you're not allowed to kiss me." For once, Brandon actually looked defeated. Remembering all the threatening things he'd said earlier, I quietly pumped my fist at his retreating back. Serves you right. Serves you right. Chapter 20. The moment the 3-day restriction ended, Brandon stopped holding back. He had finished breakfast and was about to head to the company, while I was still slowly drinking my porridge. In the next second, he lifted me by the waist. One moment I was sitting on the chair. The next, he was the one sitting, and I was sitting on his lap. "I'm still drinking my porridge," I mumbled vaguely. "I'm leaving soon. Kiss me for a while first, okay?" Before I could react, his kisses rained down on me. Fine. I gave in, opened my mouth, and let him kiss me, but it went on for too long. After a while, Brandon finally released me so I could breathe, then kissed me again. This repeated several times. By the time he left, the porridge I reached for again had already gone cold. Little by little, I learned how to breathe between kisses. Sometimes Brandon returned home past midnight, exhausted. I would be half asleep. Vaguely, I would feel him sitting beside my bed, one hand propped near my pillow as he leaned down. Instinctively, I would part my lips and accept his kiss. Brandon's kisses were rarely rough or urgent. Like him, they had a controlled, effortless intensity. More than once, somewhere between his kisses, I drifted off to sleep. Chapter 21. The peaceful days almost made me forget the mission. The system, unable to tolerate it anymore, spoke again in its ghostly tone. "His favorability is high enough now. You only need Brandon to sincerely say that sentence from his heart, and your mission will be complete. Then you can go home." The final step. Let Brandon confess to me genuinely, and I could leave this world. In my original world, I was an orphan, living like a transparent person. It wasn't that I missed that world so much. What made me hesitate was, did Brandon really need me that much? How much did he really like me? I would be gambling the rest of my life on the answer. And what truly made me start wavering was seeing Alan that day. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and the confident, youthful spirit he once had was completely gone. He looked utterly defeated. At dawn, the bar closed and tossed the dead-drunk Alan outside. He collapsed onto the ground, mumbling something under his breath. Retribution. Retribution for the cruelty and bullying he inflicted on me. That was my first thought. But I didn't feel any satisfaction. My heart didn't move at all. In the 2 years I spent conquering Alan, I had never once felt anything for him. Still, considering he was Brandon's last blood relative in this world, I walked toward him. "Alan?" I crouched beside him and poked his shoulder. "Alan, can you get up? Don't sleep on the street." How embarrassing. The drunk mess finally reacted. "Wendy?" I nodded. "Get up. Why are you lying here?" He staggered to his feet. I said nothing more and turned to leave. "Wendy, I just never understood one thing." His voice was dry, yet strangely resigned. "Why did you suddenly stop liking me?" I almost told him the truth, that I never liked him to begin with. But then how would I explain 2 years of clinging to him? The boy before me, looking like a lost stray, was nothing like the person he'd been half a year ago. After a moment, I answered vaguely, "No girl will keep liking someone who treats her badly." Then a thought struck me. I asked, "Did you investigate the truth about whether Brandon's mother destroyed your family?" Alan's lips tightened, his expression turning dark immediately. I understood at once. "So you found out." Alan, you owe Brandon an apology. You know you misunderstood him. Yet you don't have the courage to take responsibility and say sorry. Someone like you, what's there to like? Alan's anger flared instantly. That's my business. I couldn't care less. The inheritance and company his father left him were already in decline. Alan had given up on himself. He wouldn't last long anyway. I left him behind, letting him rage alone. Chapter 22. I was already in a terrible mood thanks to Alan, but when I got back, the first thing Brandon said detonated me instantly. You went to see Alan? I stared at him and blurted out, "You're monitoring me?" The atmosphere solidified at once. Brandon slowly lifted his head, meeting my gaze. After a long moment, he let out a faint laugh and spread his hands slightly. You see? You also assume I'm some kind of monster. So why stay? He tossed aside the book in his hand casually and walked toward the study. His expression didn't show a trace of anger, but he didn't look at me again. The huge living room was suddenly left with only me. Even the system seemed to feel wronged on Brandon's behalf. He really did just pass by. The company is on the same route. For someone like Brandon, to see you standing with the person you used to chase and still hold himself back from interrupting, it took a lot of restraint. It complained. And the first thing you did was accuse him of spying? Wendy, that was really harsh. I unconsciously rubbed my fingers together. Regret surged over me like a tide. I hurried to the study, knocked. No response. I pushed the door open a crack, testing the waters. The man standing by the window didn't react. Relieved, I slipped inside. I'm sorry, Mr. Jean. I was wrong. I wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. With complete sincerity, I apologized and told him I really did like him. Then I explained everything Alan and I talked about today. Brandon didn't react much. He simply said, "Come." Then he walked out. I followed him into the room filled with all those chaotic, indescribable items. What does this mean? Is this going to be punishment? I forced myself to stay calm and waited for him to speak. You know what these are used for? For perverts. I didn't say that, just forced a dry smile. Brandon's lips curved too, clearly understanding what I meant. He looked at the things on the wall and spoke nonchalantly. They were used by Alan's father. Then he added, slowly, used on me. I froze instantly, struggling to comprehend the meaning behind his words. Then I looked back up at the items again, removing the dirty thoughts in my mind, seeing them for what they were. They weren't toys. They were instruments of punishment. Alan's lack of responsibility, he must have inherited that from Father Jean. After Brandon's mother died, Father Jean blamed Brandon for it. He believed Brandon had cursed her to death. For a long time, Brandon lived under Father Jean's violent abuse. Brandon recalled it calmly, as if speaking of someone else. He said the farthest distance Father Jean ever kicked him was 4 meters. He broke 2 ribs that time. Brandon kept these things to remind himself to walk each step with caution, so he would never fall back into that hell again. Chapter 23. At some point, tears had already spilled down my face. I buried myself in Brandon's arms and cried silently, for the pain of his childhood, and for my own careless words. I'm sorry, Brandon. He finally wrapped his arms around me. One hand rested on the back of my head. His voice as warm as ever. I suppose I really am a little twisted, but because I like you, I'll try to be more normal for your sake. My crying stopped abruptly. I lifted my head from his chest, meeting his gaze. At the same time, a clear chime echoed in my mind. The system's voice was suddenly devoid of all emotion. Congratulations, host. Mission complete. Please choose, detach, or remain in the virtual world. 10 seconds to decide. 10. I stared at Brandon, asking earnestly, Brandon, do you need me? 7. Brandon looked at me without speaking. Please, say it quickly. 4. Yes, I need you. For the first time, Brandon admitted he longed for something. Good. Then I'll stay. I'll stay with you forever. A sentence with 2 meanings. 1. I threw myself into Brandon's embrace again. I wagered every day and every second of the rest of my life. All on him. No one in this world has ever loved you, but I will come to you. I will love you. Extra, side story. Alan was about to lose his mind. Wendy's words kept echoing in his head. refusing to leave. He knew he had truly misunderstood Brandon, but the moment his spoiled young master temper flared, he just couldn't bring himself to apologize. No responsibility, no responsibility. It was as if Wendy were whispering right next to his ear. Damn it. I take responsibility. I always take responsibility. He grabbed a random hoodie, jumped into his bright yellow sports car, and slammed the accelerator, skidding to a stop right in front of Brandon's villa. He hammered on the door like a madman. When the housekeeper opened it, she wondered whether this boy was suffering from mania. Where's Brandon? Brandon! Where is he? He yelled so persistently that Brandon finally came out. The man walked toward the living room, fastening his watch as he moved. Didn't bring your bodyguards today? Brandon's calm smile only made Alan feel more embarrassed. Alan huffed coldly, staring straight at his older brother. Even his loud voice couldn't hide his guilt. I misunderstood you before. You really didn't do anything wrong. All the times I hit you or bullied you, you can hit me back now if you want. Then he added quickly, I won't fight back or call the police. If you hit me, I accept it. I'm volunteering to be beaten. Brandon's first assumption was that Alan was here to cause trouble again, but the shame in the boy's eyes was too real to ignore. Brandon looked at him like he was watching a clown. After a long pause, he said, I'm not interested. He didn't elaborate. In truth, Brandon had never cared about Alan enough to even hate him, let alone hold a grudge. But if he said that out loud, Alan would explode again. Alan misunderstood, thinking Brandon simply disdained to fight him. Taking a deep breath, he punched himself twice. Brandon froze. A red mark bloomed across Alan's cheekbone. Remember this, Brandon. If you ever want to vent your anger, you can come hit me anytime. Twice is fine too, but once you've vented enough, we're even. Don't make it seem like I'm pathetic or something. Wendy had watched the entire scene from the staircase. When Brandon turned his head, he saw her smiling at Alan's retreating figure. Perfect. Very good. The man removed the watch he had just fastened, then walked into that room and casually picked up a leather belt. Slowly, deliberately, he approached Wendy. Wendy. She had barely moved her legs before she was grabbed from behind and lifted off the ground. Brandon locked the bedroom door. He tied Wendy's wrists together. A dangerous smile played on his lips. Wendy, today we're trying something different.